Hello everyone, and welcome to yet another Wargame Airland Battle comment replay by Doke, brought to you by Kent Game Guides. Quick little note, I know it's been a while since I posted another video, but actually in real life I just transitioned to a new job position and relocated to another state, so if you've ever done either of those things, you probably understand as I did that YouTube comment replays are not high on the priority list. But I'm back, I'm situated, I'm all set to get back to doing these on a regular basis. Today we have a 4v4 on the Gavle map. I'm playing on the NATO side with a US deck, and just a public match, don't really know anybody in here. And this match lasted for quite a while, and it was pretty competitive, especially for the first 3/4 of the match, and there were some interesting turns of events, so we'll get right into it here. And also very, very happily that I came back to doing these and the replay feature was implemented. Cannot tell you how much time that saves me in producing these, and really makes it look better because I can spend more time commenting on what's happening, why it's happening, why I'm doing these actions, and even give you a bit more of a cinematic feel. So now we'll dive right into this and get the replay started. Again, I'm playing a US deck. My particular deck is slightly heavier on the air side. I've been trying to get more accustomed to utilizing the airplanes that are available in Airland Battle and their functionality in the game. On the left there, I put up a flare saying, okay, me, Doke, I'm going to take Kilo on the left-hand side. Pretty good communication occurred during this match between the team players. And over on the opposing side here, we see they're also putting up a flare that Saint's going to go to Echo. Kaz is going to India on our side. And I start my deployment here. You can see command vehicle, and then I have some infantry carriers with Marines inside of them. I believe they were recon units, more recon, no FOB, and again I'm going for the Kilo side. Gonna speed things up just a little bit here as we get started. Go 3 times speed. Arlenier's going for Golf, and actually in chat right now we're discussing with Nye's Gundam about what he's going to be doing. We had kind of wanted for him to go center and hotel, but he decided he was going to just play with planes and provide recon. To his credit, for pretty much the entire game, we had our opponents scouted, especially very well on my side on Foxtrot and in the center at Charlie. If it was him, I don't recall, he did an amazing job with it. I'm going to slow things back down here now that we're started. You can see all the helicopters going out there for forward scouting for Arliner. Over here, Nyes is scouting Kilo for me. On the opposing flip side here, we have the pack side. They were pretty AA heavy throughout the game, and that was rather difficult for us. On a personal note, I know it's been a while since I've played, about almost a month now actually, regularly, and I'm never the best player to begin with, but I lost way too many planes to their AA. You can see now they're sending in some MiGs instantly, which is an interesting tactic. I send in my F-15C Eagle, and Nyes brings in 3 more fighters, and we dispatch with them pretty easily. The F-15C is a wonderful fighter, and I love it to death. Unfortunately, it is rather expensive though, at about 170 activation points, I believe it is. In the center here in Gulf, you can see Ariana's putting in some anti-tank guided missile some light riflemen into the town here, and he deployed those very early on with Blackhawks. And it wasn't necessarily needed, but sometimes your opponent can rush right up here in front of Gulf, and if he gets that town before you do on the NATO side, you really don't have a great defensive position for Gulf. It's a relatively open field. You have the trees over here to the right, but other than that, there's not much for you to work with. I'm going to get back over here to my side on Kilo. Deploying my units as I usually do, command vehicle and some scouts here on the tree line. putting in, just in case I ever need them, some anti-tank guided missiles in the town back here, keeping my radar AA, my infrared AA relatively back behind Kilo, sending a recon. Actually, it's not going up towards Foxtrot, which it may appear to be doing. I actually like to put a recon right down in here, because a common tactic by a lot of players on the pack side is to come up to Kilo with transport helicopters and infantry, dump them off up in here, and then just have them walk all the way across and into the game after you've kind of let your guard down on this side and you have your defense position set. They come right up behind on your command vehicle, and really this is the only, not the only, but probably the best spot to put your command vehicle on Kilo, and the most common. So there's not really a good way for you to recon that out unless you either have early recon with the chopper, or you see them in the act and get there before they do. Foxtrot, you can see this is primarily what I'm going to be focusing with since I have the left flank. We have some anti-tank guided missiles here in the tree line. Those are perfectly situated because their range just barely reaches out over here, and it means any advance I try to make across the bridge, they can hit with armor. So now you see a total of 6 units of anti-tank guided missiles that are going to be sitting in this tree line. That's going to be kind of difficult for me. Over here, bringing up some more concourse infantry and their AA. Now, if we look over here to the center, pretty well taken care of. They didn't really push the center at all. You can see there's some infantry and BMPs there, but not too much competition. On the right-hand side, what proved a struggle for us the entire game was Kaz was not very aggressive in getting Echo. He took India. That was great, but he was not able to get a foothold in Echo, and because of that, Pact took the tree line here in Echo, and once Pact has this, due to their anti-tank guided missiles that Pact has, it can be very difficult for any NATO advance to come up along this road. The other common strategy too is to have helicopters over the sea here providing support, because you just kind of forget that the map extends over here. The left hand side, Nyes, again, he really didn't have any significant ground forces anywhere. He just kind of did this the whole game. He brought over some infantry via transport helicopters, dropped them off here. Pretty much the exact same tactic that I was mentioning the pack can do on Kilo, he is attempting here on Foxtrot, because it's the same rule. All of this rock and forest, it can be traversed by infantry, but you can't put any recon vehicles up there. Your line of sight's very low. There's some infantry vehicles just kind of scouting him out down here, and they'll shoot at each other with machine guns pointlessly for a while. And the Legion are going to make it up in there. He brings in a MiG, and I bring in my F-15C, I believe it is. But it's kind of a thorn in the side. Going back to the mentality I've always preached heavily, you can only look at one place at a time, you can only click at one place at a time, so distractions are key. F-15, these things, like I said, are extremely valuable. You shoot down your target, have it evac. Don't let it just sit around for a while, because it can stray into AA fire pretty easily. Again, helicopter shooting at the infantry vehicle there. We have since gotten Hotel. It was actually something that Ariana wanted relatively quickly, because if you get Golf, Hotel allows you to instantly have reinforcements there to support Golf without them coming all the way from the rear. And again, one of the only logical choices to put the command vehicles in this forest here, maybe if you're risking these bushes. So what I like to do is put in some anti-tank guided missile infantry, or maybe some recon, like Bradley would be a great example, right here at this little corner of the forest, because everything then on this plane, if they ever do advance, they're going to have line of sight on it, and you're going to be able to hit it from long range. Here, I'm sending in my Raven. This whole purpose of it is to try to knock out his radar AA that we have scouted. If we sit here and we change it to see what I see, you can see that most of his units there we have scouted. And due to the Ranger recon that was placed here, and because of the recon helicopters and such we'll have on the left later, I'm able to see exactly where he has his AA and how much. He's now bringing in some bombers. I believe it was to get rid of the infantry here. We're going to go back here to watching everyone play. So we call in more fighter support. Again, those F-15s are amazing. Amazing airplanes. Almost as good as the Tomcats. Actually, though, I don't know if he gets one of them. Yep, he gets the SU there. And immediately evac because I realize he strayed way too far over here. Much more than I would have liked. What he has here with these Shilkas is it's radar almost guided bullets, and it stuns your planes so quickly that if you try to bomb anything around there, they just don't release or they don't evac soon enough, and it allows the missiles to take out the airplanes. So a good AA defense will usually have, for the pack, the Shilkas, or for NATO, some type of machine or heavy bullet flak that stuns the enemy aircraft, and then the missiles will usually destroy it. Over here, actually, my Pattons managed to get a few shots off at some BMPs that went too far up. Over here, we're actually playing against... no, we're not playing against a Polish player. What, are we? I can't quite tell. But regardless, he sent in some napalm into the forest, which made me jealous at this point. He now brings in an attack helicopter to try to get rid of the legions. A pretty good strategy if you don't know exactly where they are, but it's only going to work if he can count on not having enemy airplanes shoot down that Mi-24. On the right, if you look kind of here at the mini-map, you can see how this is stagnating in Echo and really where our trouble's going to come from. Kaz just wasn't aggressive enough. He didn't get any type of foothold in Echo, and because of that, he lets his opponent do what he wants on this side. And that means that we have to constantly watch his forces coming up this road here, even this hillside here from Charlie, and hitting the flank of the Gulf defenses. And it kind of weakens our entire front because of that. Now you see he brings in his attack helicopter, and Nyes brings in a fighter to try and knock it out. He didn't really choose a good airplane fighter, though, to knock it out with the Mirage there. Had to get too close. I accidentally brought in my Raven. I had the Hornet there just kind of circling for air cover. And I actually had two Ravens at that point. And yeah, lost it. Shouldn't have, but I did. Back over here to the right, nothing's happening. And upon reflection, it's kind of disappointing. I mean, you can see he's invested a lot of points in his M1 Abrams. If you think about it, each of those are 135 activation points. And then you consider all these defenses that are so far back here. He doesn't need this. I mean, maybe AA and a thing of infantry back here guarding his CV from a flanking maneuver or something, but even that he'd probably be able to see. The Bradleys can be so much further up. If the Bradleys were sitting right about here, where his Abrams are right now, they'd be able to hit the T-80s. It's just kind of frustrating when you look at it, and a lesson for everyone that if you concentrate too much of your defenses back, and I'm guilty of this quite often, I'll admit, if you put too much of your activation points guarding your CV, guarding your own sector, and not enough moving forward, you're going to lose out on defensive and advantageous positions. And by not having that tree line, by not being further up in Echo, he'll never take it now. And he's just he's just getting himself picked off by the T-80s there. And then these Abrams up here, they're going to have their own problems because reinforcements are coming in from Charlie. And what should have happened was there should have been infantry immediately put in this building here and probably in these forests, because now he can come right in between the two forces. He can separate Arliner from Kaz, and it's going to be a problem. I'm sounding so pessimistic today, aren't I? All these problems that are developing. Early on, you can see that it's 1,200 points to 911 points. This will run the whole 50 minutes, so if you don't want to listen to all of it, I understand. Please leave now and stop watching. But if you do, you're probably going to enjoy all the action that occurs. And look how far these Legion get up here. If he had just a command vehicle sitting right here without any protection, they'd be able to take it out. But thankfully for him, he's got quite a bit in the area, and his command vehicle sitting over here in the field. And that's actually a bit of a controversial tactic. You can either have your CV in areas like Foxtrot and Kilo for NATO sitting in the open field, where if there's, say, a recon scout or something, they're much more easily detected. Or you can have them sitting in a tree line. The downside to having them sit in the tree line then is that they're vulnerable to actions such as these Legions are committing. Over here on the right, I kind of lose focus here and have the Abrams go too far forward. If you look at it from my perspective, I thought I had everything scouted. It turns out I did not have everything scouted. And actually, sorry, that's Kaz's Abrams. Mine is over here. But I was feeling confident this is what they had, but I did not see all the units they had over here, particularly the anti-tank guided missiles. And if you remember back to the beginning, we saw all of those concurse that he brought up. And that's another great position if you're playing this pack, to have some anti-tank guided missile infantry sitting right here in these bushes, because it provides you a flanking line of sight here on any tanks that use the move fast command up that road. So that means every single hit's hitting the side armor of those tanks. So quite a bit being committed here. I did not think it was going to be successful, even just looking at what I saw they had. If that was all they had, I do not think this would have been successful. And I can't remember if I said anything, but just I didn't commit to it. I kind of knew it was going to be a losing endeavor, even if I put all my forces into it. And you can see how it turns out here. That's the other thing about this AA, is it completely stuns ground units as well, because it's just overwhelming. Going back to a neutral perspective again. Gonna take a peek over here at the right. Remember what I was saying about this building and this kind of center section that divides Echo and Golf? If they're able to take this, they can then move on to the forest. If they can take this in the forest, then that means that we have to start having defensive positions here. It's your opponent extending how far your line stretches. The further your defensive or offensive line stretches, the more units you have to commit, and really the more you have to micromanage usually as well. And if he can do it by extending your front with cheap units he doesn't really care about, but just putting there for a bothersome effect, you can really take advantage of it in other areas. You can still see no change here in Echo. And it's disappointing again, like I was saying. I'm actually looking at the replay, curious where all of his units were going. Let's take a look here at Kaz. So Kaz has his units there. He has Abrams there and artillery there. And I don't remember him having that much air, so I'm really kind of curious what he was doing. Maybe he was AFK for part of it, and that's why. Regardless, go back to the neutral perspective. Actually, sorry, we missed this. I think it was Nyes sent in a bunch of his planes and actually managed to get scout at the CV and knocked it out. So just like what I was talking about, by having it in the open, it's much easier for an enemy scout helicopter or even just general ground recon unit to spot the CV. And once it's spotted, due to the mechanics of airland battle, you have bombers like, say, the Nighthawk or even some ground-guided missiles that can be launched from distance and knock out a singular CV once it's scouted. I mean, if you lose, say, a Nighthawk taking out an enemy CV at a sector, even though you're going to lose probably, depending on the CV, the point battle there, it's worth it because he doesn't have it anymore. He can't reinforce from there anymore. All he can do is pull in reinforcements all the way back from here at Bravo, is it? Yeah, Bravo. And that means if you attack, then he's much slower to respond. He's actually now moving up some T-72s, and I have my anti-tank guided missile dragons sitting here in the forest, and they're actually a lot less ineffective, a lot more ineffective than I really had hoped they'd be when I positioned them there. What really ends up being the deciding factor are the patents, and just overwhelming force. Lots of flares on this team. I liked that. It was a lot of communication, which was good. Knocked out one T-72, and eventually it's just going to be the combination of being attacked, and they didn't have me properly scouted here. Let's see, what player is this? He didn't see any of my units there when he moved those T-72s up. That was just a horrible decision. He had no idea where the attacks were coming from, and because of that he lost all the T-72s. Things are still pretty stable on the fronts though. There really wasn't much battle going after the sectors. It was just a lot of small skirmishes like the ones we just saw there. Surprisingly, the legions are still alive, and it's just kind of a nice card to have in your pocket too, when you have something that if you scout a strategic weakness you can take advantage of. He's bringing in quite a few bombers now, since he knows that I have units here in this tree line, and I probably had them more clustered than I should have, and I did not get my fighters called in time to counter them. Lost, looks like, all the infantry carrier vehicles and one of the anti-tank guided missile units. It wasn't too bad of a loss, but then he's also calling in his artillery. Finally my F-15 gets there. Doesn't take out the Su-78, and that just kind of surprised me. And he's sitting there evacing, and he makes it, but barely. Knives really did end up helping me over here on the Echo side, whether it be with the tanks there, his air support, the legions, etc. I was very pessimistic at first, but his recon and, for example, there the Mirages intercepting did turn out to be relatively useful. Again, it was Kaz that was really disappointing. If we take a look here at what he's doing, I don't even know if he's deployed any units. Look over here to the right, the T-72 is still there, but due to a napalm strike, the artillery coming in, I've lost the Patton, I've lost another unit of infantry, and I also brought up some mortars here to really, just since I had such great scouting, I was able to see, for example, the Motor Skelky sitting there in the open, and other units that I knew mortars would be able to take out, so over time I just slowly pecked away at them. They have a lot of air support here. It's something I'm trying to train myself into doing, is having at least 2 fighters in all my decks that I can have active, and to have one constantly sitting back in here, say right about this point in the map, already deployed, because the longest the greatest reaction time comes from traveling from the only air corridor on this map way back here at the beginning. And by then, your opponent can drop its payload and get out of there. Ultimately, you want to, at the very least, destroy the bomber, even if it gets its payload off, so that way you can prevent it from being used again. And here my F-15 didn't get out in time. Their AA was set up very, very well over here, and they had quite a bit of it. I mean, you can see it's not all clustered together. There's some in the tree lines, there's some up here, and it's a mixture. It's infrared, it's radar guided missiles, it's stunning effect, lethal combination. Here you can see, look at this. Those Legion would have went this way instead this way, would have taken out another one of his CVs. It's just amazing how long those guys lasted back there. But it really does show the effect too, though, of what just a single unit of infantry can do. One turn and you would have taken out another CV. And CVs are not something a lot of people have excess of in their decks. I mean, most decks will have, I'd say, on average 4 CVs. If they have one at the starting point, one at Foxtrot there, let's assume that's the same player, one at Bravo, one at Foxtrot. We already knocked one out of Foxtrot. You knock out a second at Foxtrot, it means he only has one more CV to spare. And then he can't deploy any more. And now, due to the lack of offensive here by Kaz, and the more I look at this replay, I wonder if he was just AFK for the majority of this, even though he does continue to deploy Abrams. Actually, no, sorry, those are actually my 3 Abrams there. I had kind of realized at this point that, okay, it's going to be pretty impossible for him to make an advance on Kilo, as often is in this map. I might as well make sure we don't lose India, because that would just be disastrous. Look at all this air support coming in here. Isn't this wonderful? And there was no AA to speak of towards their front. Their closest A unit was all the way back here, it looks like. And that was a huge flaw on his part. I take that back. There's some infantry AA up here. And look what he's done. Look at this division he has created between India and Gulf. It now means the front stretches all the way up here through the town, now through this forest, and has to be wrapped around here, instead of just having this cut off and this right here. So much tiresome. So much more tiresome doing that. And you can see helos over this body of water. Sometimes people can forget about them, and they can be very effective, because over here, in theory, your tanks, your ground units, they're always advancing forward in this direction or down south in this direction. And that means the flanks are constantly going to be exposed. They're relatively protected on this side due to the line of sight with the ridge, but over the water here, air attacks can be very effective. I have some of my Abrams that I'd brought over. Why I chose Abrams, I'm not really that certain upon reflection. I think I had quite a few points to spend and kind of said to hell with it. Ultimately, what I should have done was Pattons and a mixture of Bradleys and infantry. I should have been much more diverse with what I deployed over here. And we'll see later I run into problems with the Abrams being completely outranged by the packed anti-tank guided missiles. Right now they're holding their own, though. I'm trying to keep them back from, from the BMP-3s with the anti-tank guided missiles. They're doing a pretty fair job. All these guys here are panicked, so that's helping me quite a bit. On the left-hand side, same T-72 still sitting there. I probably should have taken care of it, but I'm not certain if I saw it. No, I didn't know it was still there. So he's probably giving line of sight and vision to some of his units. And when you look at it, just how much my opponent had here, in theory, he should have made a push. Let's see here. What unit should we look at? Caress. So this is what he's got over here. And look at how poor their scouting is. On the entire map, there are 5 different groups of units they have scouted. The entire map. Whereas, you look at my side, have all of that scouted, all of this, the front of Echo, and that's saying something considering there wasn't really a player playing over there. Anyways, getting back to this. If he had this scouted, he would have seen I only have a couple units in the tree line, some tanks back here, couple units in that tree line. He probably would not have made it all the way to Kilo, but he at the very least could have pushed up and knocked me out of this little forest bunch here. And if Pact ever does get this forest patch, it allows them then to deploy on the flanks of Hotel, and at the very least give the sense that Kilo is vulnerable. Kilo is much more vulnerable when you have this high ground here and this defensive position, because then you don't have to worry about crossing this bridge. This river and this bridge, due to the valley that it sits in, is pretty much just a couple 100 meters of a death trap, because your units can't shoot at what's up there because they can't see them. Go back here to a neutral perspective and I'll switch back to the pack side. Over here, really, I think at this point everybody on the NATO side was trying to save India, because they really were putting some pressure on it. And quite impressively, Araner's kicking the packed players out of this forest section here, and eventually we'll make headway into the building in the intersection. We'll go down here and we'll look. It's really infantry on infantry, And with the Marines, he has a pretty good advantage, especially at close quarters, and having those Abrams there certainly do not hurt. Over here, you can see they're making a bit of a mistake. This is a lot of infantry to have just out in the open. In my opinion, they should have kept it in the infantry vehicles longer, brought it more into the forest, or at the very least on the tree line, and then unload it. It's quite obvious that there was no very immediate threat to those units, because until now the first infantry vehicle carrier has died. Just right now. If he would have brought them up here to the tree line, he would have had much more protection from being attacked on his flanks. And might not have even been scouted, who knows. On the left-hand side here, they knocked me out of the defensive patch. They only did it with a very small force, with Spetsnaz specifically, and I'm forced to pull back my mortars. I know the Abrams will make quick work of them there, and I had pretty much everything scouted, so I was pretty certain it was not a large offensive, just the Spetsnaz. So I send the Abrams there to take care of it. Due to their frontal armor, it'd take a couple hits, I believe, from the Spetsnaz to knock them out. Another example, though, of being aware of your surroundings, and when you have to, retreat. In this deck, I don't really have any artillery or mortar support other than those 3 mortars there, so keeping them alive was very important for me, because this was a long game. You can see we're currently winning with a 7180 to 5202 point advantage. Really, Aaron did an amazing game and already has doubled my performance and others on our team. 3,000 points. Right hand side here, flank, we have French tanks, AMX 40s, which great tanks, great guns, not the best armor though. And they're advancing, and ultimately what's going to stop this advance are those Conquest infantries and the Helos. We didn't knock them out quick enough, is what it comes down to there. But you can see he has his own Gazelle over here, but it runs out of ammo. Should have brought it back here to where there was logistics and refilled it, because it could have taken out another attack helo. And you look at it, he, in my opinion, he should not have been attacking the 1 unit of Mortar Skelly. Really, what he should have done was kept moving, and he does now, and taken out, say, the AA. Because we do not have a lack for airplanes. Once that AA is gone, it makes it that much easier for us to help. You can see, though, he does have a MiG circling. And again, that AA, it stuns the tanks. When those tanks are stunned, it means it's not firing effectively. And when you're not firing effectively, you're going to lose the damage battle pretty quickly. And just gets crushed by AT-72s coming down the hill. You can see now, though, that the Gazelle is reloaded. F-15 there takes out the MiG. Right-hand side, the Abrams, sorry we didn't catch it, took out the Spetsnaz pretty easily. And, again, just huge defensive wall here in Foxtrot that at some point needs to be overcome. Haven't talked much here from the hotel spawn point, but on this particular map, when you're playing as NATO, once you get hotel, there are 2 very critical areas that you need to secure. First, and the easiest to secure, is this forest patch right here. You can hold hotel by keeping your CV up here, but have no control of this plane down here. And that's actually worse than not holding hotel at all, because then that means your reinforcements, if you're not careful about when you deploy them or when your allies deploy them, so let's say reinforcements are deployed over here to Gulf, they're going to spawn there and may be completely unawares as they're caught in the fire of your opponent. So having this patch here allows you to secure where your reinforcements are coming from. The second position, which only helps you in defending hotel, is this little building here in this forest patch. It gives you line of sight here into this valley where they have to cross over from Foxtrot. They can either cross over here, or they have to go here and all the way around, which is on a different playing field. So, best to keep this covered And because of that, he's even got units deployed as far up as the bridge. And there's Kaz way over here. I'm sure those Abrams would be much better over there on the right-hand side. But those are the 2 points you should have to secure Hotel. On the right, his units were pushed back by the offensive of the French tanks. Raven there gets shot down. They took out a lot of our airplanes. I'd actually wager to say that the majority of their points that they scored came from shooting down our planes. I know I lost a Nighthawk and 2 F-15s and a Raven, I think, in this. That's quite a bit of points just there alone. Nyes was nearly entirely air helicopters and airplanes. Right now I'm pulling in some Pattons, and I pulled in some anti-tank guided missile infantry. What I hadn't done yet, though, and sometimes I forget about it, was pull in the Bradley. The Bradley is an amazing defensive micromanaging weapon. If you can micromanage it well, it can defend an entire sector. Just because of its range and how accurate it is. And because it's a recon, it has everything scouted for you. Anything it can shoot out, for the most part, it can scout. So it's kind of a 2-in-1 punch. It has much more mobility than anti-tank guided missile infantry does. It has more range, it has more damage, more accuracy. It has better recon capability, better optics, I should say. And even has some decent armor. At the very least protecting from small arms fire. Over here you can see, and I thought it was kind of funny, I actually only saw this advance because of the dust flying up. I hadn't noticed the actual units. For some horrible reason, he deploys 7 anti-air units further up than anything else he's got. And we take advantage of that here eventually. But you can see the T-80s there in that line, just firing off their anti-tank guided missiles, and their range is ridiculous that they have, and he's got a Logi to back him up. Their artillery stuns my Pattons, but between the Pattons and the French armor moving up, we do knock out that anti-air, and it's just free points, and more so than free points even, it's the ability to reduce the amount of AA your opponent can field. When you're playing an hour-long game, essentially, your decks are going to run out of one unit or another, and AA is a pretty bad thing to run out of. I'd much rather run out of tanks or even infantry than run out of anti-air. And you see all those explosions? That is T-80s taking advantage of poorly managed Pattons, and that's my fault there. Here's my Bradley. Look at it. It's a beautiful thing. Just slowly picking off those T-72s. Out of range. Well, actually, sorry, that one does get hit by the T-80s. The second one I call in, I micromanage much better. And I guess I actually call in 3, not just 1. Left-hand side here, T-72 still sitting there. Really should have taken that out. And look how defensive he has gotten of his, from his perspective, his right flank there at Foxtrot. Infantry there, recon helicopter here, and even more infantry vehicles that dropped off Concourse here. These BMP-2s are very deadly too with their Concourse guided missiles. Really not too much happening on the Kilo side yet. On the right, continues to be a battle. Look at all these explosions here. We'll just take a look here at all those anti-tank guided missiles being launched and coming in. The T-55 AM2s have a pretty good Bastion missile. It's not quite the same range as the Concourse, I believe it is, but still effective enough. Loses one there. That is the sound of Bradleys at work. Look at how beautiful those anti-tank guided missiles look as they race towards their opponent. I probably should have taken a step back and just outranged these guys, but they were doing a pretty good job because their accuracy is so much higher. Looks like I missed a couple there though, and I do pull them back a little bit. Let's shooting at the Hawk there. Yeah, it looks like it. More artillery coming in. With how clustered this game felt, I really wish my deck would have had more artillery. I'm not always the largest fan of having batteries or artillery firing at my opponents. I usually only like to use it for smoke and offensive purposes, but it really was a big factor in this match. Now you can see our point lead has increased by about 3,000. Nighthawks coming in and bombing the open tanks sitting there. And that's going to be pretty effective. All those units are stunned. Not exactly sure what he took out though. He's now moving his units up. He has the TD-62s. They're actually napalm tanks, so I'm guessing his deck was running too low on tanks and things to advance with, because there would be zero reason to use napalm tanks advancing here on India. But hey, I'll take the free points. I mean, they have a decent against infantry gun on them, but other than that, they were just pointless. Oh, right, over here. I completely forgot about this happening. Delta. Kaz, who, again, this just shocked me, managed to race all the way up here from these positions here and take out the CV in Delta. How amazing is that? Because of that, we get a crap ton of units that'll be spawning from Hotel pretty soon, and we'll eventually secure it. He has 4 Abrams there, now trying to hold out against the BTRs, which they do quite easily. And then just logistics trucks over there, but his biggest threat is they're so clustered that a couple bombing runs would take them out entirely. I thought we had put stuff up there earlier, but I guess it went unnoticed for longer. Over here on the right, you can see kind of a missed napalm strike there. And he has a lot of tanks completely. And this was something else too that upset me, was that because we didn't get any type of foothold in Echo, he was able to use his superior range and armor capabilities with these T-72s and T-80s by just putting them in a hedgerow. I mean, we could see them all, but we can't outrange them. And because we don't have a defensive position like a forest, we're forced to fight open plane to open plane, something that outranges us and outdamages us. And that just makes it next to impossible to knock them out of that. Over here on the right, you can see that they finally knocked out the forces out of this forest and are now advancing on the buildings. Over here on this side, you can see the 2 people that spawn all these units to go up here towards Delta are Kaz and Nyes, the 2 I've been most critical of. I take everything I said back. They did a great job getting units up here to Delta, and if you look at it from PAC's perspective, not only did they lose a sector dead in their center, but they also lost 12 points of income. Now, because they had Echo, they had the income advantage for pretty much the entire game. Those extra 10 points really did help. But without Delta, now we have an income advantage. And when you're playing against PAC, they have so many units and so many cheap units that they can deploy that they can just overwhelm you with numbers. And having an income advantage over PAC, I find, is much more useful than having an income advantage with NATO, because they really do play a game in numbers. With NATO, sometimes it can feel much more micromanaged, and that your units are, well, I'm going to be kind of specific here, but your air and some of your recon units are much better than the Pact. And just an entire army marching in here to Delta. I'm surprised it took them so long to respawn. You can see command vehicle there retreating back to Bravo. Yeah, I mean, all these forces of Foxtrot, you look at it, some of them could have come over there to help. Over here on the right, they didn't have much they could have redeployed, but also you see Nyes trying to sneak around with some more deceptive tanks here with infantry going behind the rear, and it almost works. I mean, look how unscouted those transport helicopters are. All he has to do is guess that they put their CV right there, and we probably would have won much earlier than the end of the battle if we would have taken out that too. If we would have taken out Alpha and Delta, they would have only had 3 respawn points. Excuse me, not respawn points, reinforcement sectors. Over here on the left, nothing happening still. I brought in some Pattons to try to help out here with Delta, and we run into infantry here in these buildings and 2 T-80s. Now 2 T-80s may not seem like much, but when you combine them with 2 units of concourse infantry and some regular motor Schutzen infantry, they can be quite deadly. He sends his recon and his 6 French tanks up towards Bravo. My Pattons are panicked from the artillery fire, which is not a good start to the upcoming battle. But I recognize that he's going up there. I said in chat, okay, I'll put pressure on the flank here of Charlie. Bring down my Pattons down the hill, and again, I know there's a T-80 over there, but first what I want to do is try to make sure that I move my Pattons in a position that keeps them out of the line of sight of any advancing tanks, because he now has 6 T-80s, 3 T-64s, and 4 BMP-2s. That alone outnumbers my Pattons, but also outmatches them in quality. I still do not have the infantry scouted, so I cannot attack them, but I want to get as close as possible to what I know is sitting over there, which is enemy tanks. I leave my flank a little open there, and now, finally, he must have been micromanaging his infantry to not fire, because all at once I get attacked from every side. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you lose 8 Pattons. You leave their flanks open to not only T-80s, but also infantry and buildings. Up here in the center, you remember those dozen units that he had sent to take up Bravo, because beginning reinforcement sectors are usually defended by only 1 or 2 units. Yeah, they were not defended lightly this time. Over here, you can see their CV was knocked out. But then he's got the legions over here, and I don't know how these infantry units, if they were placed there intentionally or not, but they actually run into resistance here. And again, look at how close they'd be to knocking out this command vehicle. So we have 1 command vehicle down, another command vehicle. We had destroyed one earlier there in Foxtrot, and if we get that one, there's not that much of a likelihood they'll have any left. They'll probably have 1 or 2 left, but not many. Oh, excuse me. Over here on the left, they make a push here with T-80s. We have air support coming in. These Super M60s, they don't have the best gun while moving, but when sitting stationary, 4 of them can do quite a bit of damage. My Abrams, I hurriedly run them over here, and eventually they're going to be in a position where they can fire on the top side of all of these units. And look too how he tries to sneak down some tanks here into the lower valley. But I will see them coming thanks to that recon and that recon. You can see he has his AA trying to panic and stun my Super M60s. But they do a great job. They really are a great tank if you're not familiar with them. Cheap too. Now the Abrams come up and look at this, just boom, you're gone. He now just pulls back his Afghansky units and overall does a retreat, which was a smart thing to do, because over here Nyes makes a very offensive push and should have been much more effective than he was against the T-64s. The AMX-13s, though, have next to no armor, and really, he should have stopped them so they could have launched their missiles. actually, because he retreated his units as well, it ends up severely hurting this offensive because now they're being attacked from 2 flanks. Yeah, look at that, just losing them one at a time there. So promising with only those 3 tanks there to guard that entire road, but all for naught. And of course brings in reinforcements with T-72s. Over here in Delta, you can see they're making quite the offensive push to take it back. At this point though, I mean, the number of T-80s that we had killed in MiGs, it was 18,000 to 11,000. Just a superior point advantage. And it really was too much for them to overcome at this point with 12 minutes left. Realistically, the most they could do would to try and get lucky and take out RCVs, because that'd be the only way for them to come back. But there's no way. And remember I showed you what their Bravo looked like? Look what our Juliet looked like. Imagine if they had broken through the center. We would have lost it, absolutely. And another point about this map, Gavle, is that each side only has 1 air corridor. So if you lose that 1 sector, you may have 10 planes sitting in your air communications tab. You can't use any of them. That's why it's always critical to keep those air corridors and strategic air corridors on different maps. You see now we have Abrams losing out to just a multitude of T-64s. And these Bradleys should have been pulled back much sooner. There's no reason to keep them in the open next to a building that has infantry inside of it. And now he does pull them back. Again, though, the same situation with Bradleys just sitting there. And really, it came down to a matter of them not having enough ammunition. Had those 4 Bradleys all had ammunition, they could have taken out most of these units. You see more Abrams coming up here, and they make short work of the infantry sitting out in the middle of the open. More Bradleys lost up here. I mean, those are 80-point vehicles that he's just losing because they run out of ammo and are poorly positioned. Not to say that I didn't lose my fair share of them. Over here now you see he has completely taken this forest line, and just by doing that even, it shortens what our offensive and defensive line has to look like instead of having it be wrapped around here. In India, you can see quite a bit of units sitting back, and the main reason for that is we know that they still have a fair amount of defensive positioning here. I don't think we saw how little they had behind it though, because to our knowledge we know this is here, but every time previous we had tried to advance, there are multiple units of anti-tank guided missiles waiting for us back here, and once we came into range of these, we were hit not only with their offensive power, but also the missiles. Missiles which we couldn't reach from our range. Over here on the left here, Foxtrot. I actually make a bit of a push here. I lost a couple of those, well, specifically I lost 6 of those Super M60s. So I decided to call in my own little army of armor. I have 9 units of LAVs with Marines inside of them, I believe. And then a total of 12 Pattons with some AA to boot. Let's see if I can take Foxtrot. Right here is when they're most vulnerable, when they're about to cross this bridge to enemy fire. Yeah, and you see that right there. Looks like we have one of the players surrender. I had shelled this a little bit with those, anti-tank guided missile infantry. But again, it's a lack of them having enough ammunition. All 3 of those units would have been able to shoot or get 2 or 3 rounds off of all my advancing forces there. The Pattons aren't able to quite take out the T-64s. I launch smoke. Look how effective that smoke is. I then pull the LAVs into the forest. The sooner I get them into the forest, the sooner that these units lose line of sight of them. Make pretty quick work of the BMPs that are sitting over here. The BMPs are meant mainly as a long-range, cheap anti-tank weapon. They do not do well in close quarters. all those units taken care of, I now move up my tanks from this side here, because I know they can't be attacked from their flank here. He calls in some attack helicopters. I don't respond quite quick enough because I run out of missiles with my AA, something I really should have seen coming. And really, most of my units did die from those attack helicopters. All that he has left there are those 2 AA units, some infantry back here, and if you look at it from my perspective, I had no idea where his CV was. Previously I knew he had back here, so I was just going to try to make a push on the right side here with the road. Going back here to the neutral perspective. We have the Pattons slowly being stunned, but the Super M60s make their way all the way up into the forest here. And look, I still don't see the CV. That can be the advantage of having your CV there in the forest. Even now, they're not shooting at it, they're shooting at the attack helicopters with their machine guns. They even draw closer to the tree line, they still don't see them. LAVs, I now move up, and as general response, T-72s to counter my offensive. With, of course, Mi-24s. I now have my AA there, still without any type of logistics to refuel and rearm them. Super M60, look how close that was. Right there. Could not see it. If only I had known. Hindsight is so bitter. My LAVs are sitting here shooting at the Mi-24s. Not that great of likelihood of shooting one of them down, but at the very least it can panic them a little bit so they fire less effectively on my Pattons. And you can see they're having their own ammunition problems. Nyes now surrenders, 6 minutes left. Pretty much a guaranteed victory here for us. This has just gotten to the point of, well, who can win by most. And Arner approaching 10,000 points in this particular match. It did much better than the rest of us. And lose all the Pattons on that side. Look at those LAVs. Look how close they are to the command vehicle. They still do not see it. There we go. It's dead. And that was really what I wanted out of this match. For me to hold my flank and for me to take Foxtrot. I did it and I was happy. On the right, nothing changes at Echo. They have lost pretty much all their forces, and you can tell how. Look at all those airstrikes and bombs that were dropped on those positions. It would be very hard for anything to remain. Overall, I would say this match went very well for my side. It was a bit of an overwhelming victory. But I had a lot of fun playing it, and I knew I'd have a lot of fun commenting on it, so I wanted to present it to you guys as a comment at replay. And it's not that often that you see me use a US deck either, so I thought might as well add some variety by doing so. On the opposition side there actually were a couple Polish decks. That's where a lot of their napalm came from, but actually their lowest point scoring player was Taw here, and he was using a Polish deck. So I felt kind of bad for him. Because they not be getting any love. There was, I think, too much air for them. Not much else action that happens, just kind of mop-up stuff. Where can you get points without losing anything? You can see he's calling in bombers. I quickly try to spread my 2 forces. Nothing changed in front of Gulf the entire game. India never really stepped a foot into Echo. And the only side that we advanced on was on the left with Foxtrot and Delta. So, go left flank and me. But it really wasn't me, it was really our inner. Anyways, thanks again for watching, everyone. There will be less breaks in between the postings of videos now that I'm all settled and moved in. Also, I don't know if you saw, but if you look at the official forums, Day Squad is doing a contest with Focus and Eugen Systems where you can earn some cool prizes and goodies if you make a 2-minute or less cinematic trailer for them. You can read about all those rules there on the official forums. I will hopefully have mine up in the next week or so, so I hope you guys all enjoy that. And until next time, thank you very much for watching. We're just gonna end it now. There's nothing else really that happens here. And I'll see you next time, guys. This is Doke signing out for Kent Game Guy.